Let me begin by expressing how appreciative my colleagues and I are of the sacrifice of your time and the trouble this morning to join us in this briefing session. I know that it is a shared challenge and matter of commitment for all of us as co-travelers, as citizens join in the challenge of nation building. There is no question in my mind that every Nigerian recognizes that we live in very unusual times. But those unusual times will become even more challenging, get compounded if people who think more clearly lack the courage or the disposition to help others find their voice. A great personal effectiveness guru that I admired for many years and enjoyed the opportunity of sharing a podium with once or twice, actually, Stephen R. Covey, makes the point that the most important habit of the 21st century, after his famous 7 habits, he remembered that something was surely missed out. He said the most important habit of the 21st century will be helping people find their voice. And a lot of Nigerians are desperate for their voice to be found and articulated in a time of grave pain for all. So let me welcome you on behalf of several groups of concerned citizens, social movements, civil society organizations, and groups of political parties that I have the privilege of being a part of. I mean, these include the New Fabian Society of the Concerned Professionals, the NC Front, the movement that for 6 years or so now has been championing a process of bringing together social movements, civil society organizations, and political parties to create what I think you, colleagues in the media, have chosen to call a third force. I must say that personally I don't particularly like the third force usage, preferring to think of an alternative track. Because if there's anything we desperately need, and this conversation today will bring it out, is that Nigeria is going nowhere with the current political party arrangement structure that it has. And something I'm going to refer to in the end, but I'm sure most of you are familiar already with Peter Obi's remarks to PDP leaders that seems to have gone viral in the last couple of hours. All that they have done to Nigeria is bring it to the path of destruction. And for some strange reason, they seem unable to understand that they've done this. And that's what's more frightening about the state of Nigeria. Because when there is damage and people are responsible for damage, they may try to justify their positions, but at least they do know. But it seems, in a manner of speaking, with all the swag you see around, that those who've ruined our country don't even realize that they have done so, even when it's looking them in the face. And so it makes the urgency of what we are trying to confront this morning even more challenging. Amongst those we've been talking with, religious leaders. I've spoken to several major pastors. This morning I will actually be seeing the Catholic Archbishop of Lagos, who is chairman of the Church and Society Committee of the Catholic Bishops Conference. I'll see him this afternoon. I addressed Catholic bishops 2-3 weeks ago in Abuja. We're talking to Muslim clerics. We come to you today with a heavy heart as our country bleeds. You do not have to make an effort to realize that we live in grim times. The blood of innocents crying out from graves both deep and shallow. The anguish of desperate, unemployed youth, helpless in spirit and wounded in the stomach by ulcers from hunger pangs. All of this pull at the well-formed conscience. Anybody who has a conscience and has authority in this country today that goes to sleep normally is not a human being and needs psychiatric examination. The desperate traveler separated from his commercial enterprise, from which he ekes out a living, by road, by rail, by air, and cannot get into a city like Kaduna, technically, literally cut off. A city that hosts the hub of our military-industrial complex, technically cut off. And people are able to go to sleep. If they are able to sleep, they need help. Compound all of this by trying to just watch TV, like I did a couple of days ago, and saw Shehu Okimbaloye moderating the trading of bats between a PDP chieftain and an APC chieftain, who were both technically arguing who did more damage to their country. It was a fascinating conversation. I thought I should keep the recording. I've been actually trying to call Shehu since then. I mean, if you listen with any serious interest at that conversation, it was, no, you did more damage. No, you were the ones who killed it off. No, we only cut it half. We didn't bury it. That's the conversation we are hearing in our country. No people of conscience should have to live with this normal. And so, we have chosen to act. And the purpose of this conference is to tell you about some of what we are doing. Our main object today is not a tale of lamentations, and we often are inclined towards that in Nigeria. Our country is troubled, and we need all hands on deck for a salvage operation. But first things first. 2 Saturdays back, I had a good meeting with the president of the Trade Union Congress on the state of our nation and the imperatives of roles that the labor movement need to play in resuscitating our country. And at that meeting, he assured me of the commitment of the TUC, because we had had many meetings with the Nigeria Labour Congress over the last couple of years, actually. And TUC gave their commitment to playing their citizens' role also in that process. He told me that he was leaving the next day, Sunday, to Abuja, and then we'll go on the following day to Kaduna as part of their nationwide effort at political sensitization. Sadly, when his train left Kaduna, their general secretary missed that particular train, got on the next one, and we all know what happened. I think about the reason Femi Falana has not joined me in this conference is that he's heading to the burial in Alta right now Um, I think it's appropriate in the face of all this blood that has been lost in our country, that as patriots, we all at least pause for 1 minute in silence and to remember the memory of all these people that our country has lost in the prime of their time. So pardon me to do that. May the souls and the souls of all Nigerians who have departed in these troubling times find rest in God's bosom. Amen. Well, to those of us who are left behind, who are fortunate to still be alive, the Spirit must stir in us the need to rescue our land. To lambast, lampoon, and do nothing is not a solution. So what is there that can be done? Of course, there are a variety of things that can be done. But we will dare today to suggest one or two of the things that can be done. Again, in a manner of circumstance, these times which call for courage and conviction to bring wisdom to the table are times in which we have a convergence of both the season of repentance and atonement in both the Christian and Muslim traditions as Ramadan proceeds. We should therefore call on all gladiators at this time to sheath their swords. We make a very impassioned call for a ceasefire from every gladiator. Whether they be politicians trying to make life difficult for another, or they be just pure bandits or ideologues, whatever may be the motive, even just nihilists, even though there must be a question of asking, how do you appeal to a nihilist? There is a moment where what is not reasonable is not reasonable, and conscience has to be turned to. We must now forge a consensus and a national unity approach to the moment. Indeed, in personal conversations with my friends, it's been dared to suggest that where we are today, what Nigeria probably does need is a government of national unity. And a reasoned way of setting aside the dominant political gladiators to heal the wounds of now in our country and set course anew. But that is one of the many ideas that are being put on the table. We do know, however, that the spirit of our country has gone through these kinds of times with some wisdom that has come forth. We want here to invite statesmen to approach the challenge of the moment in building a national unity solution with the same adroitness that General Yakubu Gowon approached matters in 1967. The Babangida step-aside transition and the Yar'Adua season of doctrine of necessity all called on statesmen to find an alternative track to ensure that our country overcame particularly difficult circumstances. That kind of time is now. It is not a matter of blaming who did right now or who did wrong. The time to do that will come. What is uppermost in the minds of all decent men is the need to save Nigeria now. Surely, even if we have to find models in which we ask that critical stakeholders send forth some representatives to help navigate the country through the current uncertain times that we are passing through, in the face of the declining legitimacy of the established order. Now, let politicians not pretend about this. Nigerian people don't consider them legitimate anymore, whether they are PDP or APC. Nigerian people don't consider them legitimate anymore. They think that they have damaged a country and brought it to its knees. So let us be more realistic in this swag of we were elected or we're not elected. Legitimacy is gone. The people don't give a hoot about them. They almost feel like slaves right now. Surely Afenifere, Arawa Consultative Forum, Ohanese Ndibo, Niger Delta People's Congress, Middle Belt Forum, and all of those can add their voices to the structure of solutions. Well, I've chosen to share these thoughts about a pressure valve release, given the tensions of the moment. But when we decided on this press briefing, the primary objective was to tell the story of how the alternative political party we promised has been evolving and where things are at this time, and make some announcements about going forward. We had also hoped to provide a general analysis of the challenges facing Nigeria and some of the positions taken by our shadow team, because we created a set of shadow teams that make up a watch of government. Some of us involved in the process of building the political party platform have been particularly keen on getting the emphasis right so that it becomes much more than another election contestation machine. We know the trouble that PDP and APC are in today stem primarily from the fact that they are essentially election machines and not political parties. And I can speak with authority on this because I sat down at the table actually in both party processes. In one case as a complete technocrat not involved in any partisan way. I accompanied Dr. Alex Ekweme as somebody that he had been a mentor to some of the earliest meetings in discussing the formation of the PDP. And as the vice president has often repeated in public places, he and I spent a lot of time on my dining table working on what became the roadmap of the APC. So I do not talk as somebody who does not know the reality. The problem of both parties is that they evolved essentially as election machines and not as political parties. And it's personally depressing for me because the beginning of the founding of the APC came out of a lecture that I gave, the annual lecture of Leadership newspaper. I think it was 2012. And the title of that lecture was Political Parties. And I went to the basics, to the 1911 book by Roberto Michel titled Political Parties, to talk about what political parties are, how they evolve, the challenges in running political parties, and how they best serve society. But it is clear that in the rush to win elections, we did not make the effort to build either of those into political parties. We just simply threw something together that could give people access to power. And Nigeria is paying the price now. The chickens have come home to roost. And so, what has been going on in this effort to build a real political party in Nigeria? The coalition and fusion process for what, like I say, you friends in the media have generally called a third force. Well, Nigerians frustrated by the failings of the APC and the PDP and anxious to see the back of both parties, which they realize do not resemble political parties as we know them around the world, keep asking about this third force thing. Where is it? Genesis of these initiatives that have come to be known as this third force go back to 2002, when members of the concerned professionals who had challenged the annulment of the elections of the 12th of June 1993, and who had made the decision to stay out of politics when the military chose to retreat, began to realize that they may have made a mistake of judgment. I'm sure most of you remember the story of the concerned professionals. It came out of an op-ed piece in The Guardian that I wrote in 1993 after the annulment of the elections, and it became a major rallying point for professionals to challenge military rule, what we went through, assassination attempts that people like me survived, the many confrontations with the Abacha government when Shonekon was forced out, and all of that. Eventually, the military had had enough by 1998, and they announced that they were returning to the barracks. A meeting was held in my office here in Victoria Island, in the Utomi, and the question was, what shall we do? Donald Duke argued passionately that we should move into politics, take over all these constructs we had been putting out about how Nigeria should be, implement them. Donald Duke had a strong supporter, a gentleman called Waziri Mohammed. Many of you recall we lost Waziri in the plane crash, one of those plane crashes. But a number of others argued that we were professionals who came out as citizens in civil society to protest our rights, and that what we should do is allow these politicians who did well in the 50s and 60s, but who had excesses, and those excesses attracted the military. And perhaps they would have learned the lessons of managing excess. And if they returned, they would continue to offer service to the people and move forward. And so that it was better for those of us who did not think that we should take advantage of having been the forefront of the struggle to now move into the political space. I don't know what to say, unfortunately for me, and I have to bear that burden for a long time, cast the main vote that said, let's go back to our businesses and let these people come in. But we all completely miscalculated because those people did not trust that the army was actually going to go. They thought that it was a game, that they would come back after another 1 year, and their reputations were too valuable to risk. And so they stayed back. And a group of opportunists and bagmen for soldiers moved into the political space in 1999. Make matters worse for Nigeria, at the time that the military was getting ready to leave power, oil price was at single units, $9. Within 2-3 years, it had gone to $100 and something. So much money entered coffers of government, very little accountability. Most of it got pocketed by these fellows, and they used money to erect a new barrier of entry into politics. And state capture became the defining thing for Nigerian politics, corrupting institutions of states for the benefit of individuals. That has just put us in a place where performance is so well captured in Peter Obi's presentation to his PDP colleagues. And our country has become literally the butt of all jokes in the world. So, by 2003, many of these concerned professionals had become very frustrated and embarrassed for the mistake of judgment that we made in 1998. And so we began to regroup and created a group called the Restoration Group. How do you restore Nigeria? It's a very dear friend of mine whose memory was amongst those we elevated up. Tunde Akinleye, some of us remember him as chairman of the Ikoyi Club. He was one of the stalwarts of the concerned professionals. And Tunde used to say, how can we reset the button? How can we push the reset button? Now, those conversations accumulated in 2017 in a group that Dr. Tafawa Balewa and Olisa Bakoba actually then created, called the Nigeria Intervention Movement. I was associated with it. That became the arrowhead of what is now referred to as the third force. Now, through that period, and this is a very important thing to explain, people keep saying, when elections are coming, people come together, they want to do third force. I guess maybe the fault is partly a communication fault. It's partly a Nigerian thing that, you just want to always look for something to blame others. Why didn't they do? Not why didn't I do? Because you're Nigerian, you have a duty as much as they have. But the process has been ongoing. It is not a straight line. You will have challenges, you will have personality issues. If you are committed to building, you will keep building. Immediately after the last elections, meetings began. I led a delegation to meet the National Working Committee of the Nigerian Labour Congress. They were meeting here in Lagos. Some of you may have been around that day. And to say, if we're going to build a truly popular movement, the workers' movements need to be involved. And those conversations have continued. Amongst and between political parties, those outside of these two, meetings have continued. 3 or 4 other major social movements besides civil society organizations have also continued to meet, everybody collectively, because the objective was not to create an election machine that will win the next election. It was to create a platform that can truly become a political party with clear sets of ideas about how society should be organized, with rules for entry, and ways of socializing people into the beliefs and ways of that platform. And one of those, called the Rescue Nigeria Project, chose its emphasis. How do we ensure that nobody who lacks the competence and the capacity or the compassion for leadership ever emerges into a position of public authority? That was his own focus. People like Usman Bugaje were providing leadership. I am on the steering committee of that, just like I have provided leadership position in the NC front. And several of these people all playing. You can pay tribute to the work that people like Femi Falana have done, both on the side of working with labor in the New Fabian Society of the Concerned Professionals. We meet literally every week on Zoom, no matter where we are in the world, trying to deal with the substantive issues of how to make the Nigeria project work. So when the issue began to gain some public attention, there's a question of when are you announcing? When are you? It's not plug and play. But what we wanted to announce here is that we have built a clear platform that we call the Big Tent. Big Tent because everybody can come into it. Where you sit on this train, inside this tent, is a function of how your values, your competencies align with the direction that the train is traveling. This Big Tent has been organizing town hall meetings, has been doing a number of things. In the next week or two, a few of these participating groups will go through their own, those that are political parties will go through their own conventions and make announcements. Those that are not political parties will go through their processes. Some have gone through, and you will have an announcement. But a good part of what we want to take advantage of today's briefing to do is to make a call for citizen action to decide the next set of candidates that the Nigerian people should be faced with. That part of the problem of Nigerian politics is that a man goes somewhere, steals public money, or sells his house, or whatever it is, and brings a certain amount of money and pays something ridiculous for a form. And you then say, oh, yes, he can finance the party, and then he's the candidate. There's no way our country will make progress if that's how we decide who governs. We're saying that people should, in community, we're talking to bishops, we're talking to imams, we're talking to alumni association leaders who in your groupings have shown a track of service through their lives, sacrificially giving of themselves for the good of the community. They may have money or not have money, it's totally irrelevant. He may be the man in church who sits in the middle of the church, doesn't go to the front row, doesn't want to be seen as one of those who own the church. But you know that he has character, and you know that he has competence. Let that priest go and meet that man and say, Mister, please come. People in this church think you should be their next senator. And he will say, no, I don't want. And then the community will speak to him and turn to his humble conscience and say, go for us. I want to use this platform, therefore, to announce that communities should all begin to do this and find people from amongst them that they want to serve them, not people who want to rule us. It's a new model for politics that we want to see introduced because the other model has failed us hopelessly. It has made us the poverty capital of the world. It has made us a nation, and there are some things I can't say here because I am on forums that are, what do you call them, Chatham House rules. I recently met with a group of former African heads of states, and they were saying to me, Pat, why are you Nigerians doing us like this? I mean, small African countries. We need to remove shame from the face of this country. And it requires people of courage being true to themselves and being true to their children. It's not a matter of game playing anymore. No people bear a greater burden in this regard than those of you who are sitting here. And I say this because I am one of you. I'm a reporter myself. If we don't realize that we are challenged to save our country, that is a personal duty, then let it be. I can't mention any name, but I was speaking with a very famous pastor who is going to talk about even this press conference in his TV broadcasts this weekend. And he was talking about, look, the way the place is, everybody needs to have plan B. If you have to run to come back and fight another day. And I said to him, Pastor, do you know what? I don't own a room outside Nigeria. Anybody can investigate it. I don't mean a house. I don't own a room outside of Nigeria. The only bank account I have outside of Nigeria was from my university days. And if you check it, I can tell you the total amount in it. It was $6,000 something is what's in it today. Doesn't make me feel threatened. Why do I want to run from my country? If the death will come, I won't be dying too early. I've tried enough. I've lived long enough. But why should this be the legacy of my children and their children after them? This is the challenge of now for all of us. Well, central to the modus operandi of the Big Tent is a center-left people's platform that emphasizes human solidarity and the universal brotherhood of man, and a production-focused manufacturing and strategic value chain frame-setting perspective. Underlying the thrust of the approaches is, one, a massive trimming of the excess fat, graft, and inefficiency of the current operating mode that would save millions of dollars every week. Test me, give me this economy, and I will cut you enough money from the squandermania going on, the just pure incompetence, that can put every Nigerian graduate on 100,000 naira a month salary immediately, tomorrow, next week. Try me. But we're even offering a strategy that says, above and beyond that kind of savings we know we can get out of this system of waste. Nigeria is a significant lever in the world's fight to save this planet imperiled. We'll go to COP26, come back from Glasgow. We're getting ready to head to Sharm el-Sheikh this year and all of that, and we have no strategy. But if we take the young of our country and charge the world a certain amount of money to get them to build a green wall that offers the planet a saving opportunity, we'll draw billions of dollars, pay all of those young people to be busy from guaranteed salary. Everybody over 18, you immediately get this amount of money. But between 8 a.m. and 12 noon, you are planting these trees. And between 12 noon and 4 p.m., you are acquiring these new skills, no matter how many degrees you have. and industrial parks, focusing on our factor endowments that will require those skills, will be going up and will create an economy that is a full employment economy that can double output in Nigeria within the next 5 years. Completely, easily doable. But there are some things that are fundamental to doing it. As we say, one is cutting waste. Two is placing honest people of merit at the center of all initiatives with accountability levers that are made public for the public to double up the monitoring and evaluation department's work. Ramping up compensation based on clearly stated performance criteria. Public service does not have to earn the insulting kinds of salaries that are paid today, guaranteeing that they have to be thieves. Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore proved that you can pay the public sector more than private sector are able to pay themselves, and you will get the return in a measurable way. We must be able to head our country in that direction so that we can have honest civil servants and honest politicians. Reducing reliance on revenues to develop infrastructure, but turning to self-financing projects and attracting new streams of income from asset registers and assets that are formally listed in stock exchanges around the world. I was talking to a reporter, a correspondent from, I think it was The Punch, somebody called me yesterday about, and I said, look, this thing just drives me crazy. I don't want to give these kinds of interviews. I get emotional. What are we talking about? Can you imagine the National Federal Secretariat, 30 years, lying empty, lying idle? It doesn't matter how many court cases you have on that. If you are a serious country, you get the courts to dispose whatever the cases are, that place will attract you $2-3 billion in investments, whether it is in hoteling or apartment complexing, and 200-300 people will be employed there, getting good salaries, you're taxing them. Why is this country running on waste? Why is this country running on waste? And I can give you 1,000 like that, looking you in the face, and people are hungry, people can't be paid salaries. Come on, how do you people sleep? How do you sleep to live in such a country? Well, of particular importance is an audacious, low-hanging fruit of conditional cash transfer schemes that will enable us from day one put all university and polytechnic graduates in this country without work to work. First day. It can, it should, and it must now be done. Nigeria cannot continue like this. Well, let me move to the subject of Nigerian political parties and the tarnishing of democracy. In the main, I've spoken to this subject matter in making the point that our political parties are not political parties. We need to reconstruct them. We need to determine, first of all, what political parties are. And INEC has a role, has a duty in this regard. When my friend, Professor Tahiru Jega, was chairman of INEC, towards the end of his tenure, I challenged him at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. I said, don't you think that INEC is part of the reason we have this mess? I gave him the example of South Korea, where money bags took over politics, and the South Korean Electoral Commission, deciding that South Korea was not going to make progress that way, changed the rules and said the fundamental basis for elections will be debates. You want to win an election, you debate on the streets, you debate in the town halls, you debate on television. By the time the political, money bags who could not articulate the ideas about what to do were put in the grill, they all ran away. And politics became about ideas. And part of our goal is to stop the politics of big men and have the politics of big ideas in Nigeria. The regulatory role of INEC is fundamental if we are going to save Nigeria through democracy. We have reached a very sad state in our continent's history. And as you all know, General Obasanjo called a closed-door meeting that I was privileged to participate in 2 weeks ago on this matter of the rising wave of coup d'etats in Africa. The naked truth is that the people are losing confidence in the politicians of this continent. And opportunistic soldiers are stepping into the space. The army is not the solution. But we must prevent the opportunity from being offered to opportunists. And the only way forward is good governance. That is the essence of why we're meeting this morning. Let me conclude. We're witnesses to our country of great promise and how it's been crippled by politics of big men, big corruption, and the disregard of the people. The purpose of the alternative track is return of politics to the domain of simple men, filled with love, like our founding fathers, the Ahmadu Bellos, the Michael Okparas, the Obafemi Awolowo's, the Tafawa Balewa's, the Nnamdi Azikiwe's. We are convinced that these heroes and the heroes of our struggle for reform, like the Bala Usmans, the Gani Fawemis, the Chudi Ubanis, the Ayo Obeys, the Femi Falanos, the Gambo Sababas, give us the sense that we can have a new beginning as a country. And even as we speak, the examples of people calling us to some understanding of what is really true abound. Just last night, Professor Wole Soyinka was on television speaking to the shame of what those who are PDP and APC represent. We've talked about Peter Obi challenging his leaders in the PDP. And I have said that if these were times of honor, most of those who were there listening to Peter Obi, if it was Japan, they would draw their sword and fall on their sword. They all deserve to commit suicide because of the dishonor that their watch has brought their country. But I do not believe in dishonor death. I believe in repentance. And perhaps the starting point of repentance is that they should all get out of the way first so that we can build a country. I thank you. Thank you.